Oi, what's the best game where you get to eat pie? What's the best game where you play a dead guy? Aye, you'll find out in VG247's podcast. Here, what's the best game where you swing from a rope? And what's the best game where you batter the Pope? Assassin's Creed 2. Like I said, you will find out in this your podcast.
Hello and welcome to VG247's Best Games Ever podcast, where we attempt to find the best game within a weirdly specific category. For example, this week we're discussing the best games that journos love, but most people think are naff. It's a topic very close to my heart because I've made a career out of being the only person in the business who likes Morrowind. And I don't even like Morrowind. It's just a gag that went too far, and now I can't escape that persona. Speaking of prisons of the mind, I'm joined today by Editor-in-Chief Tom Orry.
What's that? What are you implying?
I don't know. I just wanted that reaction.
Hello.
Associate editor Alex Donaldson.
Hello.
And staff writer Sharif. How you doing, man?
Hey, hello. Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's the first time you've been on.
It is.
So just to give you a quick rundown of how we're going so far, Alex is by far. I think Alex has won most episodes. More than I think Tom won the first one, and he's smarting about it because every time I choose someone else's entry, he concocts a new plan to win me over while also berating me. So it's a complicated dynamic. So let's just get into it. And Sharif, I think I want to hear from you first because I quite like this game, but I don't know how the public perceives it. I don't know how you've come to that conclusion. So. Explain.
Yeah. Deathloop is my pick. So it came out last year.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much anywhere you look, perfect scores, near perfect scores. We even gave it a 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
I played it last year during the holiday break, and I just don't see what it is about that game that A, makes it good, and B, makes it deserving of all these accolades that it's getting.
Okay.
So yeah, and I don't think I'm alone in this because I looked everywhere and everyone is like, "Why is this game getting perfect scores?" Which, granted, pretty much every game that gets perfect scores gets that kind of coverage. But this game's not even popular to really justify. So like, I couldn't find any sort of hidden pocket of people who are like, "Oh, this is the best," whatever. It's just game journalists talking about it, and then everyone else is like, "This is okay." Like, why is this?
That's interesting because. So you think you're? I'm not saying this in an accusatory way. Sorry, even though it sounds like it. So you're on the side of the public in your mind, right?
In this instance, yeah. I don't see it.
Yeah.
I don't see it.
So, and I honestly don't know what the genre. I mean, I played it, and it's like, I mean, it's too roguelike-y for me, right? I think it's a great game. I love the production design. There's a lot of stuff about it that's like that's fantastic. But I think it's the central conceit. It's that kind of roguelike loop that I struggle with. Because a lot of
journos love roguelikes, don't they?
Journos love roguelikes. This is what I was getting at.
But
why
actually,
do
I just
journos
want to
love
say this.
roguelikes?
I just want to say this. I don't really massively love roguelikes, but I'm the guy who gave this game the 5 out of 5.
Yeah, so you're on trial here, essentially.
Yeah. I will say, Shreve, that made me want to. Like, the first thing I did when you said this, I was like, "Deathloop's great. What's he on about?" And then I went and looked at the Metacritic page for Deathloop, and you've got the critic average, but then you've got the user average, and the user average is significantly lower. And it does seem like a lot of that is people who've had bad PC performance problems review bombing it. But when you ignore, even if you filter out the zeros, the ones, the twos, and the threes, which is all people going,
Yeah.
I just
abuse.
Okay.
There's still a lot of people with measured takes writing 5s and 6. So
yeah, I just like, this game looks great. There's the production design, like John mentioned, amazing music, aesthetic, voice acting, all that stuff. Just a lot of style, not a lot of substance to me. My main thing about that game is that, well, two main problems. One, it's not a time loop game. They sold that game as a time loop game. I just don't think this is a time loop game for a very simple, easy to explain reason. Time loop games, you're on the clock. Something is going to happen in, let's say, 20 in-game minutes or whatever.
Okay.
You're only
Majora's Mask.
I've never played a Zelda game. Majora's Mask, sure. Outer Worlds. What's the Roman game? The Forgotten City.
Yeah.
All those games. Something is going to happen at a predetermined point, and your goal is to change the outcome of that within that window that you're giving. This is not going to change.
And I'm not saying Majora's Mask was the first, but I think it's probably the game that popularized that. It's like the Forgotten City. I think the dev has even spoken about that game specifically, because that is the game where, I know you've never played a Zelda game, but you imagine the time limit's quite strict. So you might figure out how to open a dungeon on one loop, and then reset time, do that again quicker. Because if you open the dungeon and then try to do the dungeon in one loop, you'll run out of time and die.
Yes. Okay. And just to clarify, I just remember that I played a little bit of Wind Waker. Lovely aesthetic. Could not care less for anything else that it has. Anyway, we're not talking about Zelda today.
Everyone's getting it today.
I'm not. Don't come to me for the Nintendo stuff. I'm sorry. If you've listened to any of the stuff that we have done before, you're not gonna. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I'm the same. I gave my Switch away, literally.
Yes. So this is a setup for a time loop, fairly standard. The main thing about that makes time loop games satisfying is your knowledge. So you're essentially, if you were to be like a snobby game journo type, it's the sort of the Metroidvania of the mind, where your knowledge of the thing is what shapes the context and your understanding of the world as you go. The thing that you are given is the same. It's just the more you play it, Groundhog Day, excuse me. Everyone knows that. Everyone understands that. This game doesn't do that. Like the time advances only outside of the game in the menus when you're doing the bullshit upgrades and whatever. In game, everything is static. And whenever something interesting happens, it is scripted. So when the weather changes or when anything happens, it all happens in the background, and then you arrive later and it's like, oh, this happened now. It's like, this is not a time loop game. This is just a normal roguelike. I don't understand selling it as a time loop game at all.
This is interesting, actually, because I haven't played it enough to realize that yet. So, but yeah, because I just find the roguelike aspect really difficult to get on with, despite wanting to like it because of the other aspects that I mentioned. So it's missold as far as you're concerned as well, right?
Yeah, because and this wasn't something like someone suggested offhand, like. Every time, and that game got a lot of trailers.
It's in the marketing. Like it's 100% in the marketing. I understood it as a time loop game.
And obviously, everyone mentioned it in reviews and whatever. I'm not saying like there's one golden way to do a time loop. When you tell me this is a time loop game, I expect certain things. Just like when you say this is a Souls-like, and if I'm going in here and seeing this as a spectacle fighter, I'd be like, where is the Souls? And like this is not a reserved action game. This is just a spectacle fighter.
So I want to speak in defense of this briefly and just say that my take on that is you are correct. It's not the best time loop game, but basically it's a good time loop. It's a time loop story. It's not necessarily a time loop game. However, the things that you say about the important thing is your knowledge does still matter, because basically the structure of the game, for anyone who doesn't know, is each area of the game has 4 phases: morning, noon, night, midnight, whatever, like morning, noon, evening, and night. And so if you choose and basically, so each loop you get to go to 4 places at each of those 4 times of the day. And so it isn't the clock advancing in a Majora's Mask way. It's more of a, right, I need to figure out the optimum way to do all the things that I need to do. This person is going to be in this location in the morning, but they're going to be in this location in the evening. When's the best time to kill them? All that sort of stuff. So you do have that thing of, and as things begin to come together, you do begin to go, oh. But I agree, it's not as satisfying as it is in a Majora's Mask or similar. However, the thing that I would say separate to that is really that what it is a really cool time loop story wrapped in what is, in my opinion, the best game Arcane has made of that type. I think it's, in terms of the way, I enjoy it more than Dishonored and more than Prey, basically, is what I'm saying. And so that, for me, was what it was. It wasn't the time, because I'm a sci-fi nerd, I'm a Doctor Who fan, so I love time loop stories and paradox stories and time travel stories, and the most exciting thing about Final Fantasy VII Remake is all the weird Doctor Who-y time self-referential stuff in it. I love all that stuff, but that isn't the thing that made me love Dishonored. It was the way it played. It was what I felt was Arcane coming to the conclusion almost of all the stuff they'd done in the run-up to this.
You mean Deathloop?
Dishonored
Sorry,
and
yeah.
stuff. Yeah. No, I think it was Arcane, the studio, coming to the conclusion of what they'd done with Dishonored and Prey and stuff like that in the run-up to this. Deathloop is almost like a higher expression of that stuff, basically.
It's like everything they've done led up to it.
I think about the time loop.
I completely agree that it is. I think about halfway through it, I realized that they just wanted to tell a time loop story, and then the roguelike element came later, and then that was the game. And they were like, well, it's too late to change that now. But I think to me, like, they absolutely started with, this is a neat story to tell in that context of a time loop, and then let's just build a game around it. Obviously, I'm not privy to how the game was built, but like this to me reads like, do not sell that game to me as a traditional time loop game. The other main thing about it is, I just want to say, like, Arcane, I've always kind of respected from a distance. I've appreciated a lot of the things that they do, but I never really enjoyed the games that they make. So everyone, when Deathloop came out, was like, oh, this is the game for you. This is the game, if you thought Dishonored was too immersive simmy, overwhelming options, blah, blah, blah. This game has one ability. It's a shooter. You like shooters. You're going to love this game. And then I just played this game, and it's like a bunch of disparate elements coming together. None of them are really satisfying. There's a useless, I don't know why it's even there, weapon rarity and item rarity system. No idea why that's there. It seems like they wanted to appeal to people who play modern games. No idea. Shooting mechanics are fine, but what really undermines the action for me is the goddamn AI. It is so hilariously dumb, to a point that I haven't seen in like one of those. It is really
stupid, actually. Yeah,
it just saps all of that tension out of all of these encounters. And the other thing is, the visionaries themselves, they're really just normal AI with an ability. It's not like a weird like puzzle that you have to solve, or like a weird like monster thing, like in Prey, for example, or something like the something that you have to come.
The puzzle is usually how to get to them, right?
Yeah.
Or actually, the puzzle is usually how to reach them.
It's lining them up.
The puzzle is getting multiple of them in the same place at the same time, so you can kill them all in one loop. Yeah, that's the puzzle.
Yeah, and that's been pretty clear. And I think, well, I didn't finish the game, but I should actually look this up. But I think there's only the one way that I thought of is to kill them, which is, I think, is probably the way.
Probably you are probably right in the sense that there's loads of different ways to kill all of them. But I think the only way to kill all of them in one loop is probably generally, you've probably got a bit of leeway in terms of the exact method, but in terms of how you line them all up, I think there is probably one optimum way. Yeah,
that's what I
think.
So that's like the sort of like the action part of it is it's just it reminds me of the Ubisoft games in the worst way. I don't really like to use this comparison unless absolutely necessary, which is just, it's like something I always like to say about that stuff is that they're remarkably unremarkable. Where it's just like a bunch of really well-made things desperately just stuck together, and then you look at it and you're like, this is okay. I'm not...
That is how I feel about basically every recent Assassin's Creed game, but that is not how I feel about Deathloop.
Let's not get stuck into Assassin's Creed as well. My heart can't. All right, okay. Now let's move on to Alex, because I love this suggestion and I know exactly who you're thinking of when you suggest it. So, what is your game for this category, Alex? Please tell us.
Second appearance on this podcast, right? For this game, it's Quantum Break. I almost say Quantum Leap. Quantum Leap is far better than Quantum Break.
Oh god.
Quantum Break. I mean, obviously there is one particular person in the UK games media who really loves this game, but in general, people talk a big game about this, and I was looking it up beforehand, and I saw like outlets like Digital Spy giving it 10 out of 10, and I just do not. And they're not the only ones. Like some of the IGN regional ones did. Like Easy Allies gave it a really high score. Games TM, in fact, Games TM was probably him. So let's disregard that one. But I just don't get it, because here's what I'll say: I love Remedy, and I love Alan Wake, and I love Max Payne, and I conceptually liked the idea of the TV show within a video game thing. I think that's cool. I think it's a good idea. Actually, I think a really interesting idea would be to do that with an established IP, like to do that with Marvel or something, and have a Marvel game and a Marvel TV show on Disney Plus almost running concurrently. But in this instance, here's my read of it. My opinion on what probably happened is, obviously this was created in that era when Xbox was all about TV. That's the supercut of the press conference, right, where they say TV a million times. And basically, I think partway through the development, they began to move away from that, because they realized after the console launched, it wasn't really the revolutionary thing they thought it was. And this game ended up in a weird status, because at one point I think the episodes were going to air for Xbox Live. Then they ended up being included in the game, so they all just download.
They did end up getting, well, not included. They were streamed as you were playing, because I played that game on a launch Xbox One, and they were streamed as you were playing. I don't actually know if they had a plan to air it on a TV network, because keep in mind, when that game was...
No, I think it was going to air on the Xbox, basically. And I think they were going to have set air dates.
But actually, this is one of the things that changed between the time that game was announced and the time that it actually came out, is that their whole thing about TV had waned considerably by that point.
Well, this is what I mean, right? So the game couldn't be what they wanted it to be in the first place. And in my opinion, the end result is you have this game that has the Remedy shooting and has an interesting, actually a bit of a theme. It has a time bending mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, it's just a worse version of the game they made before it and the game they made after it. And people talk about it like it's as good as Control, and it fucking is not. It's simple as that. Yeah.
I mean,
the journos like this though. I don't think they do. I think I do, and the other person that we mentioned does.
Well, I looked and I was quite surprised.
What's the Metacritic of this game?
It's like 77.
The last time this came up, person...
Yeah, but you know what? You know why that is? Because if you go and look at the critic reviews of that game, it's lower because there are a few deeply intelligent outliers. Like Giant Bomb gave it a 4 out of 10. The Guardian gave it a 4 out of 10. Time Magazine gave it a 4 out of 10. But everyone else was giving it 8s and 9s.
It's better than a 4 out of 10.
It's
surely.
a good solid 7 or 8. This game, in my
I guess.
If you skip the cutscenes, it's great. Which is
there you go. You skip the bit that the whole game was built around and marketed on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, granted, but look, I like how the person who we are referring to is in the last episode he was just being named and getting it tight, and in this episode he's we're not mentioning his name at all, but he knows who he is. So yeah, I mean, I think this, I feel like this suggestion is a bit inside baseball.
Quantum Break is magnificent, pushing the boundaries of what's possible, both technically and from a narrative perspective.
Was that Tom?
That's a review quote.
From whom?
Some European outlet. Easy Allies, an incredible game that will stay with you long after. Packed with mystery, suspense, and engaging
characters. We are still talking
characters.
about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
but in an extremely nasty context.
I think it's a solid game that most journos actually didn't love that much. So, I mean, I think you've kind of.
I would say actually, the first time this came up, you got it tight for bringing it up. Josh West got it. Oh, I said his name now. Josh West got it tight for just being in its orbit. And the two journos who actually like this piece of shit just got it tight from other journos. So that's interesting. I don't know if it's.
I don't think it's a darling.
Well, it is a game that some journos love, but most people think enough, which happens to include some other journos as well. But this is the thing. This is the reason I picked this game. The people who love this game, for some reason, act like it is one of the best games ever made, and talk about it with this bizarre reverence. And it's almost that pushes it up for me. It's the level of the Quantum Break devotees, of which there are more than just a couple in the media sphere, are just so bizarrely devoted to what, in my opinion, is a deeply, deeply mediocre game. The best thing that came out of this game is it introduced Remedy to the actor, I can't remember her name, who then went on to star in Control.
That's true, but also I would actually take the story, specifically her character in Quantum Break, over her character in Control, because I did not like her in Control. So if you were to have some redeeming qualities about that, I think, with the exception of some of the timey-wimey bullshit, the actual character of her in that story made a lot more sense than whatever, just I'm sleeping through this lady in Control.
Maybe I should replay it, but I just don't remember anything about the story of this game other than that I was constantly annoyed by it. And I'm saying this, I've just realised I'm wearing a Remedy t-shirt. I love Remedy, but
I don't remember anything about the story, but I do remember
I think it's the
that
worst
the game was
game.
just a fun game to play. Like, it had good action.
It was decent. I don't think they make any game that didn't have good action. Remedy.
That's the Remedy thing, right?
But I don't think it was any. I think it was sort of like a time and place. If I were to kind of read into it, I think it was like a time and place thing. It was a new console. The game looks great. They were doing we're doing some realistic facial captures and blah 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 blah. All the Stevie. It was like sort of like an interesting one of those. It was like Myst, let's say, where it's like you don't really know what's going on, but you're like, oh, this is neat. This might be the future. I don't know. This is cool. I guess it's fun. I think maybe that was part of why people liked it so much.
Have you played it on the Series X? Did Quantum Break get a Series X patch?
I think it got a patch for.
It got the One X patch.
The One X patch.
I don't know if it got FPS boost.
I don't know if it got any better, but I don't think it needs much done to it. It looked really good anyway.
I was going to say, because you mentioned Sharif, that it looked great, and I think it was one of those Xbox games that was really hamstrung by how crap the hardware was.
Yes,
and then the One X came along, and Quantum Break was one of the showcases of how much better the One X hardware was, and it was running in 4K and it locked 30, and it looked, at the time, it looked incredible. It was a real showcase for like a 4K console game at the time.
Yeah.
I think you
can play it on PC, high frame rate. If that's what
PC
you want.
version is good, but I think the Xbox version, the Xbox One version, is actually remarkably good considering what that console was.
I think it's a bit of a showcase. I don't think it's a bad game by any stretch, but I certainly don't think it set the world on fire. And I think Alex is right in that there are a few journos who talk it up to a point of absurdity.
People loudly and annoyingly love it. And you know what? Here's the thing.
Yeah,
I sort of was more accepting of the loud adoration of this game when Control didn't exist.
Yeah.
But Control has absolutely made it completely irrelevant, and yet people still go on about it. I do not understand it.
Right, and let's move on to Tom. And when you sent me this, I was like, we're going to get crucified. Well, you're going to get crucified. I'm staying out of it. Well, except I can't stay out of it, Tom, because I'm contracted to wade in.
Yeah.
What's your choice? Just blurt it out.
No, I'm not playing it. I've got to set it up first, right? So I was close to picking Dishonored or Dishonored 2 because I was like, I do not get these games. I don't think many other people. I think other people feel the same about it. They're like Arcane in general.
Yeah,
they make games I really want to like, but I just can't for some reason. I just don't get into them at all. And
when Sharif said about admiring Arcane from a distance, I really felt that. I agree.
And I think they are one of the big. Their games are loved by critics. Yeah. I don't think they're as loved elsewhere. But I think they have some fans, whatever. So they're fine. Their games are interesting anyway. But for me, the thing that I see most when it happens, there's a new release. It's a Yakuza game, right? Yakuza for me, and I picked one because, to me, I don't care which one, so I just picked 6 because it's the first one that came to mind. right? So
Isn't
Yakuza
considered one of
to
the best
me,
ones, Alex.
it may well be, but that doesn't matter. It's the best game. There you go, 6. Right, so Yakuza 6. Let's pick this one. I can't remember which is if I played this one or not, to be honest. But I played one, and I was just like, I'm wandering around the streets, and then I'm in a 20-minute conversation with someone in a coffee shop or something about some nonsense. And then I'm outside, someone's got brutally murdered, but let's forget about that. That's fine. I'll have another conversation about, I don't know, like a cake or something. I'm in another shop. I'm wandering around. I'm playing a game. Oh, look, it's a game I'm playing in an arcade or something. This is great fun. Oh, this person's been brutally murdered. This is.
Have you ever been
violent.
to Japan, Tom? Because this is very authentic. I have to tell
but,
you.
But I don't get it as a the gameplay to me does not. I don't like it particularly. Like it's too. Like I could never get into the flow of it because it was so broken up by like things in the game that are stopping me play it. Essentially,
You telling me you don't want to fight delinquents?
I'm not into delinquent fighting, and I think I generally have a dislike of like this. I guess is in some ways a successor to like Shenmue, and I hate that game massively. Both the games, right? So. And I think that actually would have been a better option for this, if in reality, because some journos love that game and the series, right? Alex,
Shenmue's great.
he loves it, right?
Yes, but what if Shenmue was actually good? This is Yakuza,
Yeah, that is
Tom.
that is the Yakuza thing.
But that's the thing. That's why it's good.
You like Shenmue in spite of itself. And I'll tell you something. You know what? People always make this comparison, and when people make this comparison, they're just wrong. I don't know what to say. Apart from Like a Dragon, because that's a Japanese RPG. It's based on Dragon Quest. Stuff like that. But the main Yakuza games, you know what they are? What Sega game they are actually the spiritual successor to? Because it ain't Shenmue. It's Streets of Rage. Yeah.
Well, Streets of Rage overrated as well. So
it's like Yakuza is essentially walking left to right, battering people.
Yeah,
and lots of talking.
Yeah,
about stuff.
But
like
it's a modernized Streets of Rage.
I could never get into it. I'm accepting that people like it, and that is fine.
Yeah.
I'm happy for those people. I wish I was one of those people because there's so many of these games. I would like to enjoy playing them once, just one of them, even just I'd have fun with. But I don't, and I think lots of other people feel the same. But on my timeline, which is a lot of journos essentially, which we are, I know, but we're separating ourselves from this in some kind of weird disconnected way for this podcast. They're treated like they are the greatest thing to ever happen in video games. I just don't get it.
Let me just put something over to you though, right? Interesting thing about Yakuza is it was a series that Sega basically abandoned in the West. They basically stopped putting them out because they just felt there was no point because there was no market for them. And then a grassroots campaign sort of got them to release it. And now it's a seriously important series for Sega. It's growing. The sales are getting bigger with every game. Like a Dragon was the best performing one they've ever had. They've now split the series in two, where they've got the Judgment games, which is the more traditional games, and the next Yakuza is going to be another turn-based RPG. Like, to me, this is a series that's on the rise. This is a series that's growing. This is a series that is clearly growing in popularity. Therefore, people can't think it's naff.
I think people can. Like,
it is on the rise.
People think lots of things are naff. Like you brought up Doctor Who of all things on a program, on an episode where we're actually talking about naff things.
I saw you wincing about that.
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who's
Doctor Who is
TV
the perfect example of this. Like
Dynasty Warriors.
Lots of people think Doctor Who is the naffest thing ever created, right? Me, I'm one of those people. Yeah,
but that's not most people. It's the longest running science fiction program in the world. It's an institution. It's hugely popular.
I reckon if you showed it, if you did a blind test of these unsuspecting people, like here's Doctor Who, here's a children's TV program, like they'd be like, why is this children's TV program so much worse than this other one?
Because here's the thing: I had another game I almost picked for this. I'll tell you what it was, and that was The Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword, because that is a game that people gave 10 out of 10 to, and I said on Twitter once, and somebody who reviewed it and gave it a 10 out of 10 actually got genuinely quite upset with me, because I said anyone who gave that game a 10 needs a brain scan, because it's terrible. I mean, it's not terrible. It's the worst Zelda game by a country mile. People who think Zelda 2 is bad It's got some lovely ideas, and it's a lovely stepping stone because you don't get to Breath of the Wild without Skyward Sword. But it's just poor, in my opinion. And I said this when the HD version came out. I said, when I wrote about the HD one, I very diplomatically said the HD version gave me a newfound appreciation for a game I'd previously hated. It didn't mean that I no longer hated it. It just made me appreciate elements of it a bit more. But the reason I didn't pick Skyward Sword is because the Zelda fan base is huge, and there are a lot of people out there who, you know, maybe they should go to a doctor, but they genuinely do love that game. And, you know, I
like how this is the episode where you've decided to treat the title exactly, whereas every other episode it's like, forget about the title, we'll just wing it. Let's just bring in multiple games and whatever we think. This one,
no, but what I'm saying is, this is why I didn't pick Zelda, though, because I was like, too many people love Zelda, and I think too many people love Yakuza. Like, if you go, like, on the day that we're recording this, which it won't be going out for a while, but on the day that we're recording this, it's the day after they brought back a bunch of old Yakuza games into Xbox Game Pass, and you go into the replies of that tweet, and it's not journos. There are people like saying, "Thank God, I thought they would be gone forever. I can finally go back and finish
accounts. They're bots.
You know, there are people absolutely going wild.
They're accounts created by journos.
People are from places like the northeast of England, like Yakuza, which I mean, it's got that baseline popularity. If it's reached those sort of climbs, you know.
I think the interesting thing that's happened is, for a long time, Yakuza was a game that weebs enjoyed. It was for people who were obsessed with Japan, and it was like, and one of the things I've written about this game at some point, I can't remember in what context I wrote about it like this, but I wrote about, and you touched on it, Jim, the digital tourism in Yakuza, where if you can't go to Japan, it's almost like a nice little way to go to Japan while everything's locked down. I think that was the context that I wrote about it in during lockdown. It was like, I can't go back to Camera, you know, to Downtonbury, but I can go to the Yakuza version of Downtonbury and enjoy and go to the Yakuza knockoff Don Quixote shop and all that sort of stuff. And that's what that's what it was at one point. It was for people like that. I think the interesting thing that's happened over the last 3 games, is that it's begun to transcend that, and people who don't care about that have started to come in.
So because it's like you're fighting a crab or something. It's like, oh, wonderful. I think what I've realised, the problem with this whole episode is that we've titled it completely wrong, right? So it should be called Best Games That Most Journos Loves, but these particular journos on this podcast don't like.
No, I maintain that Deathloop, no one fucking likes Deathloop outside of game journals. That you cannot find.
The only people who like Deathloop are fucking...
I made a good choice for my first appearance on this episode, goddamn.
The one thing about your Twitter that I will say is Arcane games don't sell. That's the...
Which is proof that
being bought by Microsoft is probably the best thing that could have happened for Arcane, because they will probably we'll see, because obviously Deathloop is currently PlayStation.
They've just got infinite money to make games that don't go anywhere.
And I bet those games do a lot better on Game Pass. When people don't have to pay for them, I bet those games do a lot better.
Yeah, sure.
The next Arcane game is massive, because I bet,
and it saved them from having to do some hot, awful monstrosity free-to-play MMO assassination thing, which would be terrible, but it's probably where they were headed had they not had the Game Pass.
But it's the Sea of Thieves effect, which I maintain. I love Sea of Thieves. I think it's a great game, but Sea of Thieves, it's now past 25 million players, which makes it one of the biggest games ever for some benchmark. And I don't think I think Sea of Thieves would have been a 3 million seller without 3 million players tops without Game Pass.
Yeah,
that's
totally.
the power of that.
Totally.
But that's my point about Yakuza, is that I just think it's a growing series, and it's the same, and it's got a really dedicated fan base that is just growing, and that's why I didn't pick Skyward Sword, because I was like, well, I think it sucks.
Quantum Break's fan base is growing all the time. I mean,
can I just point out that I really like how Alex is just not even making a point of doing it, but just instinctivly pronouncing Yakuza correctly.
He likes showing the rest of us up. All the time.
Talking about the digital tourism aspect, I just remember I wrote about Ghostwire Tokyo for VG247 a little while ago.
Yeah,
and it made a lot of the same point of that game. Is now Ghostwire Tokyo is not a brilliant game. I think it's good, but I think it's it's a very Ubisofty. It's basically a Far Cry game with Japanese mysticism in it, right?
Yep.
And but I love it, and one of the reasons I love it is because it reminds me of hanging around in a 7-Eleven at 3 a.m. in the middle of Tokyo, and it nails that atmosphere despite the demonic invasion and everyone being dead. So there is a lot to be said about just that aspect of Yakuza nailing the sense of place, but. As you say, Tom, we're not here to review the games. This is
if this was best game that is popular that you don't get, I get it, Tom. But
yeah,
this is not. That wasn't the prompt.
There is a big group of journos, right? And we're saying this like we're not part of this. We are, but we are somehow taking ourselves out of it for this discussion.
Yeah,
where we're like, oh, it's like Yakuza. Is that better, Alex?
Yeah.
Is a game that I feel that is massively hyped up beyond. I agree that it's a bigger thing than it used to be, right? Like it was never big, and then it has grown. I agree, but I think it is elevated beyond where it is. I feel to me like this is at the point where, like a few, like say like the Souls games, right?
Yeah, I thought you were going to bring Sekiro or something to this.
Well, we're like. They are now, like, after Elden Ring, they're legitimately huge, right? That is a big deal now. But a few games back, they were definitely more... They were bigger. They were made out to be bigger than they were. Like, the audience...
However, one thing I will say, common misconception on this front is, yes, Elden Ring has, like, blown the doors off. But I saw this a lot where people were going, like, Elden Ring's come out of nowhere. It's turned this series mainstream. And I'm like, dude, Dark Souls 3 sold 10 million copies.
Yeah, but in a year.
Those are Final Fantasy numbers. Yeah, but regardless, those are Final Fantasy numbers. Final Fantasy VII Remake has only sold like 6.5, 7 million.
Yeah. I mean, it's gone from like slow burn popularity into stratospheric instant popularity.
Basically, but people were acting like Dark Souls was like was like Yakuza level, and it wasn't, or Persona level where
no
3, 4 million, 5 million copies is great. Dark Souls was already quite big. I agree. When it first started out, Dark Souls 1, you were dead right, Tom, and 2 to a lesser extent.
Well, I've got to bring this to a conclusion. I've got to pick something, and
Sharif's one. Let's just say Sharif, because
what?
I don't want Alex to win. Right?
Yeah, but that's because you're one of the Quantum Break lovers.
But also, you don't have a case for it. I'm sorry.
I agree that my argument was bad. I mean, let's face it. I emailed you at like 5 p.m. yesterday. I was like, quick, get something out.
My reply to you...
I honestly thought you'd be doing Sekiro or something, like an old From Software game.
I should have done that one.
Yeah, I think you would have made like a perfect case for Sekiro, for example, because I think it's one of the reselling one, and people cannot, myself included, cannot stop talking about it.
I reckon next week we should be like the title of the episode should be something along the lines of like games that Alex likes but the rest of us don't. All right, okay, so like I've got to bring this to a conclusion, and Tom, you stated exactly where I was headed. I think Sharif's won. I think Deathloop is much closer to the spirit of the title of this episode than the other two have gotten, purely because I think Quantum Leap is very inside baseball.
You didn't even say the name. Right? You called it Quantum Leap. This is exactly my point. It's such a forgettable game that you called it the wrong name 2 minutes after last talking about it.
Bloody hell, sorry. Yeah, so I did. I'm never not thinking about Scott Bakula, though, in fairness. So yeah, Quantum Break it's a very inside baseball choice, and it's essentially a dig at precisely two people, one of which is on the podcast, but everyone else thinks it's a joke. And we can't put Yakuza 6 in, Tom. For goodness sake.
3?
None of them.
What if the other ones were called?
None of them. I mean, maybe those stupid Yakuza games with the zombie invasion. Those are particularly only liked by the deranged, but not necessarily journos. But okay, so Deathloop's in. I think Deathloop is the winner because I mean, look, who is the archetypal games journal these days? It's Jeremy Peel. He loves it. I don't get it. And on that basis, Deathloop's going in.
I can respect that. I've got to bring my A game next week now. This is
Fair enough.
decided.
Fair enough.
I can't lose two in a row.
Alex won like 3 episodes in a row, which really upset Tom actually. But you know,
I'm gonna have to stop. I'm gonna stop phoning this in. I've got to actually do some proper research.
All right.
It makes me wish I had put Zelda forward, but you know, hey-ho.
I mean, it still wouldn't have won, but it would have been a discussion and a half. But that is all we've got time for. VG247 is, of course, not just a podcast. We are also a website. We do news, we do reviews, we do guides, we do all that lovely stuff. And if you like this podcast, please leave us a nice 5-star review and a lovely comment about how you like us all and how we're great.
Has to be 5-star because that
it has to be
our
5-star.
Our limited marketing budget has to be thrown out because we've
Has
only
to be
got
5 stars.
a graphic that says it's a 5-star rated podcast.
So what I would say is, so in order to make sure we don't have to spend money on changing that graphic, if you love the podcast, please give us a 5-star review. And if you don't think it's worth 5 stars, just be quiet.
Yeah,
just keep it to yourself.
5 stars or not.
just shut up. I'll respect you for it. All right, thanks very much, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening. If you like the show, please review it, subscribe, and check out what else we do on VG247.com.